Happy New Year and welcome to 2024. I don't know if you're excited, terrified, or skeptical, as you probably have very good reason to be, but you're in it. You are 5 days in as of recording this. It'll probably post tonight, so probably same day. So, yeah, 5 days in if you're listening to it on the day this posts. How are you feeling? Today's episode is going to be all about my advice for the best things that you can do with your therapist. What are the number one pieces of advice that I have when I'm with my therapist as a therapist myself? You know, it is a little bit of a privilege to be a therapist and to be in therapy at the same time, because if anyone's going to get their money's worth and maximize their time in therapy, it's your boy. I don't think that's true for every therapist, because what's funny is I feel like you have two ways that you can go. Either one, you are going to maximize your time in therapy, or two, because you're also a therapist, you're going to judge the shit out of yourself and lie to your therapist about everything that's going on. And so you're going to deny the things that the therapist says. You're going to call them stupid. You're going to be like, they don't actually know me. Oh, I know what techniques and therapy tools they're trying to use on me. And it's not going to work on me. So there's this inflated sense of self, which I think many of us have in many situations in our life. And that inflated sense of self, just like with narcissistic personality disorder, comes from a real struggle with feeling good enough. And I think we all can identify with that. But what are the things that I do as a counselor and as a therapist that maximize my time when I'm in therapy? I'm going to share with you the insider tips, tricks, and secrets here today. It's really one thing. I want to focus on one thing that you can do the very best. And that is, drum roll please, tell your therapist the most embarrassing thing you possibly can. And do that every time you meet them. I want you to think of the worst thing, that thing that keeps you up at night, that thing that you've told nobody, that thing that you would rather peel your skin off and poke your eyes out with a stubby number 2 pencil than tell another human soul. Because when you tell your therapist those things and you get this stuff off your chest, it frees you to live authentically, and it allows you to start accepting yourself because you see that acceptance in that other human being. Now, in today's episode, we have 6 points that we are actually going to go over of why most people don't do that, and why you are holding yourself back if you're not telling your therapist the most embarrassing things you possibly can. There's a lot of real great benefit to it, and if I could encourage you to do that, that would be probably the number one thing I would encourage you to do. And just speaking from my personal experience, there are things that my therapist knows about me, things that I have said to my therapist that not another damn soul on the face of this planet will probably ever know, because I'm in different contexts, right? Like, we all play roles and characters throughout our life, and I'm playing a husband role to my wife, a father role to my son, a son role to my parents, an influencer role to you guys, and a professional role to my clients, a person of wisdom or an educator role to my interns who are part of my practice. So I'm always playing these different characters, and there is very few, I would venture to say almost zero, unless you have a really healthy romantic relationship with somebody, almost zero places that you can be 100% all the pieces of you at one time. And that's why I talk about this embarrassing thing, because that's kind of point number one here. Point number one is, because we have so many expectations on us in so many different areas of our life, it's really important that you share those embarrassing things, because you can be all things all at the same time with your therapist. That is the goal. And that is really helpful, because you have blind spots when you wear different hats, right? When I'm thinking as a father to my son, I'm not thinking about myself as a son usually. Maybe that's not a great example, because maybe in some ways I am thinking about being a son. But let's say being a father, I'm not really thinking about being an influencer. Those are kind of mutually exclusive. I don't do a ton of dad content on TikTok because that's not my influencer role. I have value that I bring people when I tell them about their dreams, and I have value that I bring my son when I parent him and love him and hold him and care for him when we're having snack time in the afternoon, right? Those are two very different things, and I have to, in some ways, they call that compartmentalization, right? I have to compartmentalize and be what needs to be in each area. It's not that I'm lying about who I am, right? And there's a huge difference between compartmentalization and like repression denial, right? I'm picking the character that I'm going to use in this situation. It's an authentic and real character of who I am, but it's maybe not the whole picture. When you are with your therapist, the beauty of therapy is you actually get to see how all of those characters, in Jungian psychoanalysis, we call those archetypes, how all of those archetypes that are inside of you are pieced together into this beautiful mosaic that is the full picture of you. The deepest and most removed part of you are, well, what psychoanalysis would call the shadow, are those parts that you are guilty, ashamed of, and embarrassed about. Those are the ones that hide down the deepest. And little shout out here, I don't know if you've ever read Brené Brown, one of the world's foremost qualitative researchers in guilt and shame. She has a wonderful book, many wonderful books. One that it was like on the Oprah's book list and all this stuff. I recently just gave it to a client, actually. So now I don't have my copy. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection. And she goes around and she looks at and talks to people about their stories of shame and how it influences their life. She's researching that role. And she's done that many years ago. I think she's on to new things now, but it's just revolutionary work. And so we know this from the current research and from the books that are out right now, that shame holds us back in so many ways and really cripples us emotionally, which leads into physical problems as well, like struggles in our physical body because we're emotionally repressed and shamed in these other ways. So when I tell you, tell your therapist the most embarrassing thing you possibly can, I mean it. Find the thing that there's no reason to bring it up. There's literally no reason to bring it up in therapy. It's just an embarrassing thing. Tell your therapist, hey, I am working on radical self-acceptance, and I would like to share with you this thing that is really, really embarrassing to me. There's no other reason to bring it up. I just need to tell another person. And blah, just spit it out before you can even think about it. It is wildly impactful. Now, point number 2. A lot of people get really nervous. They're like, wow, if I share this with my therapist, will I get arrested? Will I get Baker acted, right? Will I be taken away and held somewhere because they think I'm crazy? Let's talk about that for a second, right? So as you're looking at getting a therapist in 2024 and starting your mental health journey, turning a new chapter for yourself, it's a good point to be thinking about. What are the limitations of confidentiality? Because if you're going to be sharing the most embarrassing things about yourself in the context of a place where you know that legally they have to keep that secret, otherwise they lose their license, you kind of want to know where the edges of that playing field are, right? What is out of bounds? And I will tell you, it is all about harm. If there is a potential risk of harm that is irreversible, the therapist is mandated to report that. And so what do we mean by that? If there is child abuse going on, they got to report it, right? You got to keep children safe. That's number 1. If there's elder abuse going on, got to report it. Those people aren't able to defend themselves. And if there is some suspected elder abuse, they got to let somebody know to make sure that vulnerable populations stay safe. Now, sorry, I'm out of frame here, so now you can see me. Number 3 is homicide. If somebody is at risk of life-altering injury, the therapist also has to say something. Now, what does that look like, right? If you say, hey, I have this embarrassing story, I carry this guilt and shame around with me all the time. When I was 23, I hit somebody with my car and they died and nobody knows about it, right? Let's take a look at it. As a therapist, when I'm listening to this story, I'm thinking to myself, is anybody in clear and present danger right now? No, it happened, right? It could have even happened last week, right? But nobody is in danger right now. I have no duty to warn anybody. Everybody is safe. The people that are hurt are already hurt. It's over. It's time for me to help my client, right? Nobody is in danger. Now, if they say, I hit that person with my car, it felt really good, I'm thinking about doing it again. Now we need to have some conversations about safety, right? Is this person, going to struggle to keep the rest of society safe because of their struggles, right? So that's where that line is. If it's already happened, it's done and over, you can tell your therapist. If you are talking about things that you are intending on doing that harm other people, your therapist will have to warn somebody, right? Now, if it's just thoughts, like intrusive thoughts, maybe you're embarrassed about that, right? I have intrusive thoughts. I was sitting in class and I thought about stabbing the kid in the pew in front of me in the neck with a pencil. I, as a therapist, would then ask, are you going to actually do that? Like, are you afraid that you won't be able to control yourself? No, I just had the intrusive thought of like, what would that be like? Would they bleed everywhere? Like, how would the class stop? Okay, great. We're dealing with intrusive thoughts. This is not intent, right? Same principles apply with self-harm, right? If you're, hurting yourself in different ways, you're coping with bad strategies that cause harm to yourself, but it's not life altering or life threatening, it's fine. We could talk that through, right? If you struggle with certain ways of self harm that you need to talk with your therapist, please, by all means, goddamn, that's what the therapist is there for. Tell them, right? If you are struggling with thoughts about harming yourself and ending your life, tell your therapist about those things. Talk it through. The big difference is, and when a therapist needs to act, and some therapists do make mistakes with this, is intent and threat. If I ask this question, right? Somebody tells me this, I'm going to ask them this question after they talk to me about their self-harm. I'll be like, do you feel and will you promise me that you will keep yourself safe until I see you again next time? And they say yes, we're good. We're fine, right? If they're talking to me and it's like, hey, I don't know if I can keep myself from ending my life over the next week. Okay, the priority now is safety for my client. I need to get them to a place where someone can keep an eye on them and make sure that they survive until we can talk again and work this through, right? Permanent solutions to temporary problems. That's kind of the problem here. So that's really where the line is. If you got questions about that, please, I'd love for you to join the Discord and the email group. Email me about it. We can put it in an email thread and talk these things through, because I know there's a lot of confusions about these limits of confidentiality. And when we're talking about sharing the most embarrassing things of your life with your therapist, you kind of want to know where in bounds and out of bounds is, right? Now, here's the thing. If you are really scared, it's important to tell your therapist so they can involve other people, right? Like, Baker Act is for the safety of you and others, right? And so it's not a punishment. You didn't do anything wrong, but it's like, oh, if you're not able to keep yourself safe, let's go to a place where people can care for you, be there for you, and make sure that you are going to stay around because you're a valuable human being who deserves care. So even if that's the truth, please tell so that way they can keep you safe and work this through. A good therapist will go hand in hand and hold you through the process. I've done it with clients of mine many, many a time. And it's okay. We work those things through. So anyways, just to put that there, that's inbounds, out of bounds. That's how that works when it comes to confidentiality. So embarrassing things, weird stuff that you're into, sexual kinks, embarrassing moments, guilty things that you've done in the past that you feel ashamed of, times that you've hurt people and you carry around that shame, tell your therapist. Those things weigh on your mind much more than you can ever believe. You may think that you're able to push them out of your head and not think about them, but those mental cycles still spend energy and spin in the back of your brain. And so the more that you cut off in shame, the less of your brain capacity, of your cognitive ability and emotional resilience you have available at your disposal, right? So it's like, sure, maybe it's 1% of your brain is spent thinking about that guilty thing. But if you got 10 things, well, now you're operating at 90% capacity, right? Let's say you've got 20 things, 80%, right? I'm just making up numbers here, but you can see how that starts to add up. And the more guilt and shame, the less capable you are. So getting those things off your chest, talking about it with a therapist, absolutely number one piece of advice. Brings us to the third topic. What will my therapist think? And here's my advice. I don't give a fuck what they think about you. Right? That therapist, if they're a good therapist, will love and care and support and listen and empathize no matter what crazy, air quotes, if you can't see them, you're watching on Spotify, crazy thing you say out of your mouth. I have heard the strangest, weirdest, most interesting, bizarre, unique stories that anybody ever hears. Like, that's my day-to-day job. I got into this profession because I love that. It's not that I love the bizarre and weird. It's not like I'm watching a reality TV show episode, but it's like, I want to listen what your life perspective is like and how you got in a situation where you feel this way, made that decision, because I want to understand you. I don't want to judge you, right? That's the outside world. I don't know, maybe this is just uniquely me, but I do think it's many therapists, and especially the good ones. I'm not here to judge. I didn't get into this profession in order to listen to stories and be like, well, I must be pretty okay because Joe Schmo over here, well, he's really fucked up. That's not it at all. My whole goal and my reason to be a therapist is I want to listen humbly, respectfully, and quietly, as somebody shares their life story, their internal thought patterns, so I can learn what it means to live life through your shoes, through your lenses. That's what I want. And so I gain such a benefit and I feel so humbled and I really feel so privileged to be able to listen to people and what they are going through. There's no bone of judgment in my body. Now, sometimes I will have to make clinical judgment between, well, is that a symptom of depression or is that a symptom of anxiety? Is that something that's going to harm that person later in life? I'll have judgment in that way, but it's all based on like medical documentation stuff. It's not judgment as in like, oh, you're weird. I've never had that thought in my life. I'm like, wow, what a unique perspective that I'm learning something from and that we get the opportunity to work through together. That's why I do this. So like, a lot of people talk about trauma dumping and like, my therapist is going to think I'm weird. If your therapist thinks you're weird and they say that or show that in their face and make an icky face, fucking fire them. Find another one. There are so many therapists out there, and especially with virtual now, you can find so many good ones. Like there are some bad therapists out there, sure, right? I don't think that's the majority. There are a couple bad apples in the bunch. Don't let it rot the whole system for you. Find another one, fire them, get a new one who can love, care, and respect you like the human being that you are. I would hope to say I'm one of those. My clients tell me they feel very cared for and understood when they're with me. And so I really try hard to care for people in that way because that truly, truly is my authentic nature, my heart, and my personality. That's what I want to do for people. So what will your therapist think? If I was your therapist, I would think, wow, that's interesting. How did you get to that conclusion? How did you get to make that behavior? How did you get to the place where that was the best decision you can make in that moment? I want to learn. I want to understand. And so my heart comes from a place of curiosity. My thoughts are, I want to know. I am curious about how you got there and what that means for you. If your therapist is thinking something else, like you're weird, you're crazy, that's gross, find another therapist because that's not what therapy is supposed to be like, right? Okay, we got some of the obstacles out of the way. Point number 4 out of 6, right? We're getting through this. We're making some good progress, folks. Thank you for tuning in and staying along. Problem number 4. We got some of these issues out of the way, the obstacles. Will I get arrested? Will I get Baker acted? What are my therapists going to think about me? But here's the real benefit for you. Back to that point of radical self-acceptance. One of the biggest things in therapy is learning to accept yourself. We are incredibly complex creatures. And I say that with a little bit of a grain of salt because in some ways we're pretty simple. But when we become pathological, things become really complex and confusing. And so we become less simple. Healthy is simple, straightforward, it works. Unhealthy is very complex. And so by sharing these embarrassing things, you are purging the system, right? It's like pouring the Drano down the drain to clear the pipes so the water of your life can flow cleanly and healthily through the conduit that is you, the human being. It's when we start to hide stuff, we get like little bits of gunk built up in that pipe, right? There's a little bit of, dandruff here and some hair there and a little bit of phlegm there. And I don't even know what that is. Did someone put a whole roll of toilet paper in the drain? Those things that hide inside the tubes that make us up clog who we are. And so it limits the flow of your being. And I don't mean that in a metaphysical sense. I know many people think of it in a metaphysical sense, and I love that. But I'm just talking purely psychologically. I'm just talking as a human being. The more obstacles, guilt, and shame that you have to navigate through inside of your head, that path towards self-expression becomes incredibly winding and complex. Ideally, the path of self-expression, the path of living your life and being yourself, accepting yourself, should be straightforward. A to B. The quickest route between 2 points is a straight line, right? If you've got to go around all these obstacles of, that's some shame to that. I haven't accepted that about myself. It's going to be really hard. And at a certain point, that path gets so winding, you lose your way. And then you're sitting there in the beginning of 2024 thinking, why can't I achieve my goals? Why can't I do the things that I want to do? Well, I'm telling you, this is it. This is it. Coincidentally, just to bring it full circle, the reason that dreams are so important and they're the number one tool I use in my practice is dreams will show you where those obstacles are. You may be consciously repressing them while you're awake, but when you are sleeping, your mind brings them to the forefront of your thoughts. It pulls those memories out. It pulls those emotions out and says, hey, Here's the thing that you've been avoiding. Here's the emotion. Here's the shame that is holding you back from authentic self expression. And it's time to face those things. So, accepting yourself and having that real profound love for who you are, not in a narcissistic way, but knowing, recognizing, and accepting your value is crucial and fundamental for all things, right? You can't heal any of these other things if you haven't learned to accept yourself. That's got to be the foundation. Otherwise, any techniques that you're building on top of that are going to be pretty shaky and unstable because you haven't built that foundation of self acceptance, of love. And that's why even many of the theories that we know now are the most effective in counseling, like person centered therapy, all stems from unconditional positive regard. A therapist is supposed to model unconditional positive regard for their clients. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, let me share it a little bit more because it leads into point number 5, right? 5 out of 6 for today's little podcast episode. Unconditional positive self-regard is that no matter what comes out of your mouth, and this is genuinely how I feel, maybe surprising for you, it doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth, I care about you and I value you as a human being, right? Uh, it doesn't matter. Like I'm thinking of 100 different things inside of my head that people think is going to cause me to not care for them anymore. And that's just not the case. Now, there are many cases where if somebody tries to harm me or somebody is breaking boundaries, right? Like, for example, somebody continues to schedule appointments and then consistently no call, no shows. Well, I have a responsibility as a therapist to keep my schedule open for those who really need the help. And if somebody's scheduling and then not showing up consistently, I'm wasting my time by scheduling and keeping that time safe and not helping somebody who would be showing up. So again, even in those moments, I know, and this happens, a lot of people don't call me, right? When I make those phone calls like, hey, like, it's 2:15 now. Our appointment was at 2:00. Are you showing up? Is everything okay? Did you get in a car accident? And then they ghost me, right? It happens all the time. I'm not calling because I'm mad. I'm not calling because I'm frustrated. I'm calling because I want to make sure you're okay and I want to work through it together. What is keeping you from showing up for this appointment? I want to help. But if somebody is boxing me out, I have to respect that, right? There's no hatred in my heart. There's still unconditional positive regard, but I just have a responsibility to help the most people that I can. And so if you're going to box me out and not show up, that is a-okay. That is your life to live. And I don't make any sort of presumptuous suppositions that it is, you owe it to me to show up. It is my due that you need to be there. No, if you don't want to be there, don't be there. That's fine. We'll fill it with somebody else, right? And you can come back later. Give me a call. You're like, hey man, I was going through this thing. I didn't want to talk to you because I was really ashamed about it. Cool. Let's talk about it. Why don't we schedule another appointment? That's what it's all about. And so this point that it leads into, this unconditional positive regard, which a therapist needs, is modeled by the therapist in order for the client, in order for you to learn that love for yourself. We become broken in relationships and we heal in relationships. Can't take credit for that saying. I heard it somewhere else. But that is the key to psychotherapy. By listening to and experiencing the unconditional love from a therapist to you, you learn what that looks like, and then you can start to model it for yourself. And that is absolutely beautiful and amazing. It's just a wonderful thing that really helps heal. And we know from the research, it helps heal every psychological struggle. It improves every psychological struggle. It may not cure it, right? Some of the different ones like bipolar or depression that needs medication because of chemical imbalances need medication, right? If you got a broken leg, you got a broken leg. You need to see a doctor. But that unconditional love helps at a baseline level. It helps across the board. And that's what you are learning from your therapist for you. So if you share the most embarrassing and shameful things that you have inside of your mind, that is going to be absolutely the most and quickest, the rapid way to growth and health for you is to allow that person, that therapist, to unconditionally love those things that you hate about yourself the most. And so if you want rapid transformation, if you really want to get better, tell your therapist the most embarrassing thing you possibly can, the most traumatic stories, the worst ones. That's what we're here for. That is what I have studied and done a lot of personal work to be able to carry that burden with you. You're not making it difficult for me. It's the job that I chose, and you don't have to take responsibility for it. It's mine, right? This is the responsibility I like. I chose it. So let me help. Let me help. Now that leads into point number 5, because we're supposed We're supposed to learn that from our parents. Unconditional love is supposed to come from mommy and daddy. But as many of us know, that doesn't always happen. And so by accepting this unconditional love from a therapist, a complete stranger, there's no strings attached. And we start to reparent ourselves and relearn that unconditional positive love that was supposed to come from our primary caregivers, but maybe didn't. And so it is part of the healing process and helps sort of foster and work through that internal family system by accepting that love from the therapist. Many of us come away with scars from our childhood upbringing, despite our parents maybe even trying their best. We still come away with scars because nobody's perfect. And so we have to learn those things. And so that thing that you remember being judgmental, commented by your mom or dad, that you now hide every time that you don't get a passing grade or any time that you don't achieve ultimate success in the project that your boss gave you, and you hide and procrastinate and hide those things away in shame. You're supposed to experience unconditional love from your parents first, but sometimes it trickles into our life. And so by learning this for yourself and starting to love yourself first in an unconditional and positive way, you get those obstacles out of the way again. And so we're healing childhood trauma by telling our therapist the most embarrassing, scary, and unsettling stories that we possibly can. It brings me to the last point for today. Point number 6. Nothing can cause you to lose your value as a human being. And I mean that. Think about it. There are consequences to actions. If somebody does something that hurts and harms and threatens a child, we have to prioritize the safety of the child. If somebody hurts, harms, and threatens society in a way that is inappropriate and unacceptable, we have to protect the community, right? And so there will be consequences for those actions and for the behaviors of each individual. We have to keep that protection in place because those people are counting on us for protection. But even the most egregious, right? Every human being has value. And I know that you think of yourself as a monster. I know that you think of yourself as just somebody who's unredeemable, broken beyond repair, and somebody who just has nothing to offer and share with the world. But I don't believe that. Everybody has a place. Everybody has value. And I'm not talking about money. I'm not talking about how many things you can complete in a day. I'm talking about value. If you are alive, if you are breathing, you are valuable. And there are things that we can do to help. There are ways that you can empower yourself and grow in this year. And that growth is going to look different one person to another, right? If you're struggling with something over here that this person's not struggling with, your growth is going to look different. That doesn't mean that your value is different though, right? And so, we can get a little bit controversial here if we wanted to, like gender norms, right? Boss and employee, color and race, right? There are different abilities and skills that each person has. I personally am not super good with business planning. That may surprise you. I'm not incredible at it. I kind of struggle with the executive functioning because of my ADHD. And so I am not as skilled in that area as some others. But that doesn't mean that I'm less valuable as a human being than a business coach, right? It doesn't mean that I'm less valuable than somebody who's an accountant just because I don't know how to balance my books as well as they do. We're both equally valuable. And I believe the same thing about my employees, my interns, right? They are equally as valuable as human beings as I am. I have more experience in this field and I'm their supervisor. I'm ultimately responsible. And maybe even the paychecks look different, right? But that doesn't mean that they're less valuable and deserving of less respect than I am. No, absolutely not. If anything, I try and treat them with more respect than I expect back because they need that extra space and grace in order to grow as therapists, right? I expect them to treat me in ways that maybe aren't totally right, and I'll correct them and talk about that later, right? But I'm going to treat them with absolute respect no matter what. And same thing happens if you don't return the phone calls, right? If you no-show me, right? Or you pay with a check that bounces. Listen, it's happened. I'm not mad, right? I understand you're going through something, and there's patience and grace for that. I've got to protect my family and make sure I can buy groceries to feed my beautiful son and my amazing wife. But there's no ill intent or ill will in my heart. You are a valuable and amazing human being, and that's genuinely how I feel. A good therapist will feel the same way about this too. If your therapist is struggling with this and you're not feeling some of these things, I encourage you to bring this up with them, confront them about it, and like talk this through. Be like, hey, I don't feel these things. And if they struggle and you still don't feel that way, find another therapist who can accept and love you. Listen to what they say, consider it, right? Maybe there's something where you're misinterpreting what they say, and that's kind of one of the ways that you misinterpret the world in general. Could be, right? But ultimately, if you're not feeling like you can trust your therapist and be open with them about the most embarrassing things you possibly can, you're not going to have the growth that you deserve and that you possibly could to be and achieve your full potential in 2024. Listen, shout out to the email list. Thank you all for listening to this podcast. Subscribe to the email list on my website, lyonmentalhealth.com, Lyon mental health. New things coming this year, working on a bunch of stuff. But hey, if you want to know what your dreams mean and get the most out of those things your mind is trying to whisper to you in the dead of night while you sleep, sign up for the emails. I'd love to talk about it. Discord, as always, is here. This episode will actually be up on YouTube as well. So subscribe on YouTube, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Until then, have a great year. Have a great night. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.